What's up, y'all? We are back with another edition of DNVR Rams Live. As always, I am your host, Justin Michael. Hope everybody has had a great start to their week. Should get a whole lot more exciting here in the second half. Really excited to get out to Las Vegas for the Mountain West Basketball Tournament. CSU, obviously, the 2 seed. I think going in, Ram fans probably feel as good about their chances of winning this event as they have. I mean, really any year that I can remember being a fan. Obviously, there have been plenty of good CSU teams that went into the event hopeful, but it just feels like with the way this team is playing right now, with the way the bracket broke down, they should have a pretty good chance here to be competitive. So I'm going to give some keys for CSU out in Vegas, talk about why this team is dangerous, why you should have faith in their potential of making a little bit of noise in this event. We will kind of go game by game through the bracket and talk about the most likely outcomes. Obviously, anything can happen in these one game formats, winner take all. I would be shocked if there wasn't at least one upset along the way. So you're just kind of hoping that you aren't the one that gets impacted by that. Obviously, we'll go through some of the bubble teams that Ram fans should be rooting against both today and for the rest of this week. We'll talk CSU Nevada because that is the most likely matchup that the Rams will have tomorrow evening. And then at the end, I might give a few more thoughts on the state of the women's basketball program. I did about 10 minutes on it yesterday in the intro on the audio only podcast, where I just kind of talked about how, from an administration standpoint, CSU is going to have some tough decisions in terms of what do they want this program to be. It feels pretty stagnant at the moment. You just went through a lot of the numbers and how it's felt fairly underwhelming over the last decade or so, despite the fact that, Williams has won 20 plus games in 9 of his 13 seasons. It's not like the program's a disaster. It just kind of exists at the moment. They're just kind of there. They're not awful, but they're not great. They're not a championship contender. What do you want the program to be? That's what you're going to have to decide potentially, especially with the aspirations that CSU has athletically right now, but especially moving forward, going into the Pac-12. When you listen to the comments from John Weber, from Amy Parsons, it's pretty clear that they view CSU as what should be a championship contending athletic department on every level. And certainly we're hoping for more on the football side, and basketball, obviously, we're hoping to see them capitalize here down the stretch on the men's side, but we'll see. It's going to be interesting to see how all that plays out over the next couple of years. I'll also just kind of go through some of my favorite things about Las Vegas if we have time. We'll see on that one. I tried to kind of create the perfect night on the Vegas Strip. I actually haven't had a whole lot of opportunities to be on the Strip the last couple of times I've been out in Vegas, just because we were staying downtown with that Circa promo we had going there for a couple of years. So I don't even think I've been to the Strip the last 3 or 4 times that I've been out in Vegas. So I'm looking forward to that. Lot to get into today. Obviously, a pretty loaded show. CSU Football's Pro Day is tomorrow. I obviously will not be able to cover it because I will be out in Vegas for the tournament. Torrey Horton is not one of the anticipated participants, so imagine that takes a lot of the excitement away from the event. That's not to say that there's no value in it. I mean, there's a couple guys here that have somewhat realistic NFL aspirations. Jack Howell, probably the best. But I think Henry Blackburn and, some of the corners, maybe, it'll be important for them. Obviously, Drew Moss and Jacob Gardner, how those guys are able to look in their workouts will greatly determine if somebody takes a flyer on them day 3 in the draft, or they get, a camp invite or something like that. All those guys are, at the very minimum, going to get a cup of coffee in the league, but we'll see. if they're able to break through. I mean, I think Jack Howell should play for a couple years. I think Blackburn maybe has a better chance than some people are giving him as well. But no Torrey obviously is a little bit underwhelming. I don't blame him. I don't think it would make sense to run again after what he did at the combine. You only run the risk of running a worse time and making people kind of question you. You looked great. You looked like you were moving well. Just leave it at that. Maybe he'll do some private workouts for teams or stuff like that, but I don't think there's really any benefit of him doing, a public pro day and then having people speculate and all of that kind of stuff. Before we talk CSU, before we talk the Mountain West Tournament, if you are listening on YouTube, give us a thumbs up, say good morning in the Toyota chat. Now is a great time, by the way, and I meant to mention this at the beginning. Now is a great time to become a DNVR diehard. If you are not, we've got a sale for this week only, $36 for the year. Awesome deal. I mean, you're going to get access to all of our premium content, everything I do, everything my colleagues do as well, though. I mean, we've got NFL free agency, obviously, but we have also got the Avs and Nuggets making playoff pushes. Baseball's right around the corner. Like, you're going to get access to all of that and then some. You get deals at the bar. You get a free T-shirt. Like, there's a lot that goes with it. But what I will say is, if you appreciate what I do on the CSU side, if you want me to be able to do stuff like this, go out to the Mountain West Tournament, hopefully the NCAA Tournament, if they make it, supporting my work and being a diehard is the best way to do that. I know everybody is not able to. I get it. Money's tight for me as well. So I certainly am not trying to guilt trip anybody or anything like that. But if you do like what I do, if you support my work, I ask you to take advantage of this sale, become a DNVR diehard. If you do, send a screenshot my way so I can send you some love. Let's get into it. Let's just jump right into it. I talked a little bit about this yesterday on the pod as well. Just my reactions to the Mountain West all-conference teams, which came out, the official all-conference teams. Obviously, I released my own, which don't count for anything, but I do put a lot of thought into the process. You can read that on the site right now. You can also go listen to an audio-only podcast where I kind of break down why I picked the guys that I did. But if you missed it, the first team, Tyson Degenhart, Boise State, Nick Clifford of CSU, Donovan Dent, Nelly Jr. Joseph, and Ian Martinez. That's exactly who I had on my first team. On the second team, we've got Alvaro Cardenas, Boise State, Nick Davidson, Nevada, Nick Boyd, San Diego State, Miles Bird, and Mason Falslev. The third team consists of Ethan Taylor of Air Force, Kobe Sanders of Nevada, Josh Duje of San Jose State, Deedon Thomas Jr. of UNLV, and Obi Agbim of Wyoming. Obi Agbim also named the newcomer of the year. I picked Alvaro Cardenas for that. I'm not 1,000% sure he actually applies. My understanding of the award is it goes to the most impactful transfer. If you were going with somebody outside of the conference, I think Nick Boyd would have made a lot of sense. As far as my thoughts on all of this, Pitino winning coach of the year, Dent winning player of the year, not surprising at all. In principle, I'm fine with it. It's well-deserved. They're league champs. Dent had an incredible season. New Mexico had a great season. Obviously, they have the head-to-head over CSU. I don't think it's worth throwing a fit over or anything like that. I don't think the Rams were completely screwed over. Like, I'm not trying to be dramatic or make it some bigger deal than it truly is. Obviously, those guys were deserving. I think you can make a pretty compelling case that Nick Clifford should have been the player of the year. All of the metrics favor Nick when you look at like win shares, when you look at Ken Pom and Torvik and all that type of stuff. Like they all have Nick Clifford as the most impactful individual in the conference. I personally feel like he elevated CSU's ceiling as a team more than anybody. New Mexico was supposed to be good. They are good. Credit to them. They lived up to the hype, unlike some of the other teams. I just think that when you look at what Nick has done to put this team in this position, it's pretty incredible. And obviously, I've argued multiple times that Niko Medved is the best coach in the league. In principle, I'm fine with Pitino winning coach of the year just because he swept him, but I really don't think that anybody did more this year in terms of elevating their squad from a coaching standpoint than Niko Medved and company. Just a terrific job to be able to get this team from being 500 in mid-December looking like they might be lucky to win 16, 17 games all year. And now to be sitting here with 22 wins on the season, 16 wins in league play alone. It's just a testament to the season that those guys have had. Really been incredible. I think Kyan Evans was a major miss. Him not even making the third team to me is absurd. Like, I would say if you watch the games very clearly, he's a top 10 player in league play. To not even be a top 15 player, I just have a lot of beef with that. I really hate rewarding guys with decent numbers on awful teams. They've got to score too. They're not going to get shut out every single game. Air Force, Wyoming, some of these teams, they need guys to get buckets too. But when it comes to the top players in the entire conference, I just think we should be rewarding those that elevated their team enough to actually win something and factor into the equation. And while I've got nothing but respect for Ethan Taylor, he can ball. He's a very talented guard. I'm shocked he didn't enter the portal before this year. For him to make the all-conference team with the season Air Force had, that's ridiculous. It's just ridiculous. He has no business being on that list. And you're going to honor 12 guards out of the 15, and you're telling me Kyan's not a top 12 guard in this conference? Get out of here. That's just not. That's insane. I would have gone True Washington over him. I would have gone Magoon Guath of San Diego State over him. So it's not just Kyan that I feel like has a gripe here. There's a lot of weird stuff, though. Like, Obi Agbim is the newcomer of the year, but he's third team all conference. That doesn't really make sense, especially because you have Boyd and Cardenas on the second team. Guath is both the freshman and defensive player of the year, but he's not an all conference player. What's the logic in that? I actually did not have him on my all conference teams either. I am basically as the 16th guy just looking out, but I wouldn't have had him as defensive player of the year. I would have gone Miles Bird over him. I don't know. I think there's some pretty questionable outcomes here. New Mexico and CSU only having a combined 3 players out of the 15 is the same as Nevada and UNLV, who went winless against New Mexico and CSU. Like, what are we doing here? I just don't think that some of these guys that were included have a very logical case over some of these highly talented players from teams that finished in the top half of the conference that factored and were really good down the stretch. Like, when you look at what Kaya did, and remember, November, December, none of that applies until the game in Reno. He's 52% from the floor, 45% from three-point, averages 12 points, 3.5 assists in league play. Over the last 10 games, though, he's up to 14 points a game. He's 45% from deep, 3 assists a game. The Rams are 8-2 over that stretch. He scored 15 against Wyoming in a blowout win over the Cowboys. He scored 20 on the road against Air Force and Ethan Taylor, both guys that were included in the all-conference recognition over him. He outplayed both those guys, and obviously CSU, a significantly better team than Air Force or Wyoming. So I really take exception to some of these guys that made the list over some of the players that were omitted. I think having a Wyoming or an Air Force player win any of the individual conference honors is just asinine. I don't understand that at all. I would have gone 3-4 different guys over him. So I just think it's a little silly. Obviously, really exciting for Nate Clifford, who was first team all conference, first team Mountain West all defense as well. 7th season in a row that CSU has had an all conference player on the first team, I should say, which is really dang impressive. I mean, it just shows the talent that CSU has had over these last couple of years. Shout out to John Tanjay as well. He was named first team all conference at Wisconsin. Getting some All-American love as well. Man, you look back at that class of, 2021 or whatever, with Roddy and Stevens and Tanjay. Decent chance all 3 of them end up in the NBA. All 3 of them in the mix to be player of the year in their conference. Pretty impressive. Different World Neat could have been part of that group as well. But I just wanted to give a couple of thoughts on all the all-conference stuff at the beginning. At the end of the day, it's all just for content. It's really not worth, losing your mind over fixating on it for the rest of the day or anything like that. But I think Kyan's got a legitimate gripe. And I think if you're CSU, you have a right to feel slightly slighted in this entire process. Is it the end of the world? No, not really. But if you're not watching all of the games outside of the ones that just involve your market, you shouldn't have an official vote in the all conference process. And maybe that'll piss off some people that I'm going to see this week, but that's true. I think there's some really hard decisions that come in this process. And I think it's very clear that there were a couple of folks that maybe didn't do the prerequisite work to accurately come up with the best players in the conference. So that's me. I'm on my soapbox, I'm coming off a little bit egotistical, so I'm gonna try and transition this here. Let's get into the Mountain West tournament. Let's talk about some bubble teams, talk about CSU's at-large case, all that fun stuff. We are going to take a quick break here. We need to shout out a couple of our partners. First things first, we're going to shout out Shady Rays. Shady Rays is an independent sunglasses company offering a world-class product that's rated 5 stars by over 300,000 people. They make shades that are stylish, but they won't break the bank, which I think we can all appreciate. Crystal clear optics, making them the perfect choice for all outdoor adventures. They've got hundreds of styles to choose from, so they're bound to have something that works for your style. I wear my Shady Rays doing everything. I'll wear them out on the strip this week, although it doesn't look like the weather in Vegas is supposed to be all that tremendous. It's supposed to be warmer in Denver tomorrow than it is in Vegas, which is a little bit of a bummer, but I want to be looking cool, so I'll be rocking my Shady Rays anyways. Exclusively for our listeners, Shady Rays is giving out the best deal of the season. All you got to do is go to shadyrays.com, use the code DNVR for 35% off polarized sunglasses. Try for yourself the shades rated 5 stars by over 300,000 people. I also want to shout out our friends at Toyota. Trucks have always been a part of Toyota's DNA. For generations, Toyota has built durable legends destined for greatness and perfect for Colorado. Whether you're conquering off-road trails or hauling the weight of the world, there's a Toyota truck that's just right for you. Check out the Tacoma or the Land Cruiser. Both of those are sick. They've got 17 available models with all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive like the Epic 4Runner. Toyota also offers more low and zero-emission vehicles combined than any other automaker to give customers numerous choices to reduce their carbon footprint. 16 hybrid vehicles to choose from, like the Tundra iForce Max hybrid truck. Not to be outdone, Toyota SUVs take command on the road and on the trail, so you can explore the road less traveled without sacrificing smooth city rides and SUVs like the RAV4 and Grand Highlander. Toyota, proud partner of CSU Athletics and the official vehicle of DNVR. Toyota, let's go places. Hot Sauce in the Toyota chat says, this show suck. You might be illiterate. All right, let's get into the field here. Let's talk about the teams that have the best opportunity to make the big dance, the teams that have the least to worry about. I will start with New Mexico, who I think is a lock, regardless of what were to happen. I think they could lose by 20 on day one, and they should still be pretty safe in. I mean, it might impact their seed line a little bit, but when you look at the brackets and the projections right now, they're safely in. They're projected as a 9 seed based on 109 brackets that they factor into the equation on Bracket Matrix. Utah State also comfortably in on 109 of 109 brackets. They might be a little bit more worrisome if they were to have a poor performance in Vegas. Like if they were to just get blown out, I would say that from an eye test standpoint, I don't know if Utah State has done a ton these last couple of weeks to help their cause. Fortunately, they've got a really solid non-conference resume. The metrics love them. I mean, they're still the highest team in net and all that. So they should be good. But I think they've got a little bit more to sweat about than, say, New Mexico. San Diego State, projected as an 11th seed right now. They are on 108 of 109 brackets, so still pretty good. Still widely viewed as a team that should be safely in the field. Again, if they lost to Boise State in that 4 or 5 game, like they were to get blown out or something like that, maybe they get sent to Dayton. I still have a hard time seeing a program like San Diego State not get the benefit of the doubt from the selection committee. There's a human element to all of this that you definitely have to factor into the equation. And I just think that people look at San Diego State and they associate it with being the best of the Mountain West. You know, at this point, they have that national brand identity. They are viewed as a big-time college basketball program. I don't think the Aztecs are as good as they've been in recent years. I think they lack a facilitator. I offensively, they're so streaky. Like they do a great job of turning you over and creating those transition buckets. We saw it firsthand in Viejas with CSU's game out there. I mean, felt like Miles Bird, picked CSU's pocket 5-6 times, and it just led to super easy dunks the other way. But I just have a hard time seeing them be consistently offensive or being consistently successful enough on the offensive end to win 3 games in 3 days, especially assuming that you would have to go through Boise State, likely New Mexico, and then potentially, CSU, Utah State, one of those teams. Can't overlook Nevada or anything like that. And we'll talk about the Wolfpack here in a couple of minutes, just because that is going to be their most likely opponent tomorrow. I'll be traveling and stuff, so we won't have an opportunity to do another show in between now and then when we find out the opponent this afternoon. But I would say in terms of the teams that could win it, realistically, there's probably 7 that you could talk yourself into. That might be a bit of a stretch. That would be including Nevada and UNLV. UNLV's been kind of hot coming into the tournament. They're not beating up on the best teams you've ever seen, but they've got a little bit of momentum, and they certainly look more competitive and more willing to compete, than I would have anticipated once Dean Thomas went down. Just kind of felt like they would be one of those teams that threw in the towel and ultimately, looked to the future. Nevada's kind of similar deal. Like their body language has been pretty poor over the last month or so. They don't, on the surface, seem like a team that would be hot enough to win this event. That said, you look at the talent that they have on the roster. They did have a couple of all-conference players, Nick Davidson, Kobe Sanders. They've got some guys that could score. Rollison, he had like 21 points in that game against CSU in Fort Collins. So like they've got some guys that are scary. And just in general, it's really hard to beat the same team 3 times. Like you're in that position with a lot of these teams now that we have the new league slate of 20 games. Back in the day, there were 2 teams that you would only play once. And I think a lot of the time you just kind of hoped you could draw one of those, especially for like CSU. It felt like the unbalanced schedule always, instead of them losing games against like San Diego States and those types of teams, it was always like, congrats, you get to play all the hardest teams in the league twice, but you only play San Jose State and Fresno State once apiece. So you're hoping to like draw one of those in the day 1 of the Mountain West tournament. You don't have that anymore. At some point, you're going to have to beat some good teams if you want to, win this event. So I don't really think there's any point in trying to get like too cute and like, hopefully Fresno upsets this. I mean, you can technically do the same argument for them. It's hard to beat them a 3rd time, even if they do suck. But you're going to have to beat some quality teams if you want to solidify your resume as an at-large team, which at this point is slim. It's not impossible. The Rams have really climbed pretty drastically these last couple of weeks. They weren't even in the bubble conversation now. Most people kind of have them as one of the 4 or 5 teams out, just outside looking in. CSU currently 54 in net. They've got 7 Q1, Q2 wins. When you look at the teams around them, it's pretty comparable. What hurts CSU, obviously, is one, you only have the 1 Q1 win, which picking that up in Boise was huge. You needed that at minimum. And I still think you're going to need, I think you need 2 wins at minimum to feel pretty good about getting in. It wouldn't be a guarantee. I still think we'd be pretty nervous come Selection Sunday without the auto bid. But I think if you beat Nevada and then let's say they beat Utah State, we'll say Utah State gets there. I think that'd be a Q2 game, might be a Q1 on a neutral site if their metrics stay good enough. At that point, I would feel pretty decent so long as CSU just didn't get their ass kicked in the title game or something like that. And there are some challenges of the bracket, despite the fact that you're on the other side of New Mexico. If you do make that semifinal game, it's a scheduled like 10 p.m. Mountain Time tip-off. And there have been a lot of years where that has gotten delayed because they have to have a cool-off period in between games. So if 1 or 2 games go long before it, you're probably looking at more like a 10:30 p.m. Mountain Time tip-off, and then you play an afternoon game the next day if you win. It's really It's so dumb. The same thing happened to CSU in 2017 when they beat San Diego State and then ultimately lost to Nevada in the title game. It's nothing new or anything like that. They've always done this for TV. Basically, we do the late games Thursday and Friday because the TV stations want to prioritize the other games in front of us, and then we do the early afternoon games so that the big games, or so the bigger games in bigger leagues can be, on CBS and all that, like at nighttime. We're being flexible for exposure from a conference standpoint, which I think makes sense, but it's certainly a disadvantage if you play in that late night semifinal game and then turn around on like 10 hours rest and are playing again in a game that is going to matter a whole lot if you're CSU. Like New Mexico, assuming it's them that you would be facing, they feel pretty good. They don't really have anything to play for other than wanting to go back to back. They won the tournament last year and wanting to be the regular season and tournament champions. Like they really just want to make a definitive statement, but how much motivation do they have? I guess we shall see. CSU, like I said, right now probably would not be an at-large team. Pick up another key win or two, they should be in a pretty good spot. They are 16-4 over the last 20, 7-game win streak right now. One of the hottest teams in the country. I mean, not only have they taken care of business here down the stretch in the league slate, but they're winning decisively. And I just keep coming back to there being a human element with this whole selection process. It helps that when the most recent impression you've left with the committee is beating the living hell out of some of these other teams, like beating Utah State by 27 and then going into Boise and beating them by double digits in their building in a 7-day span. That's pretty good. This team is not running on fumes trying to, army crawl their way in like the team was last year. Last year was a really fun group, don't get me wrong, but just between injuries and the intensity of the season really took its toll on those guys. And I think some of the pressure, like it started to add up, when they lost, God, what was it, like 5-6 league road games in a row. It felt like every single game was life or death for like 7 straight weeks. And there's been some pressure of late now that you do have some realistic expectations. And like, now that it's not just, the optimists in us talking ourselves into this, maybe hopefully being a possibility, like you really do have a decent chance to play your way into the tournament as of now. So there's a lot on the line, but I think it's helped this team that they haven't had to do this whole song and dance for like 2 straight months, because I think it just wears you down. And I like the depth of the roster going in. We're going to talk about that here in just a second. Some reasons to believe in CSU. We'll also get into some of the bubble teams that you should be rooting against this week if you want the Rams to have an opportunity to get into the field. But I'm excited. I think this is going to be, I think it should be pretty wide open. Like New Mexico is most certainly the favorite. I think they're plus 250, CSU plus 350 to win the event. But I mean, like Boise State is certainly good enough to win it. San Diego State, while I have some questions offensively in terms of their consistency, could they turn it on for a couple of days and really just beat teams up defensively, create a bunch of turnovers, dominate you in transition, hit just enough jumpers from the outside to find a way to grind out a couple of wins? Without a doubt. Utah State feels like they are kind of in a spot CSU was in last year, where you maybe peaked a little too early in the season. Teams have kind of figured out some things that they're doing. You could still see them though, especially with Martinez and Falsleff and the depth they have. Could they get hot for a couple of days and win this? Yeah. And I think that's what's really exciting is all of those top 5 teams, you could talk yourself into having a pretty good chance. And Nevada's got talent. UNLV's hot. I don't think either of those teams are going to have the consistency to win, 4 games in 4 days, but could they upset a team or two and get to the semis and play a factor in all this? Without a doubt. I'm going to miss the Mountain West tournament when we don't have it anymore. So I'm really trying to embrace all of this and like just lean into it as much as I can. I'm excited. I hope Ram fans are. It seems like everybody is as engaged going into the tournament as I can remember. Some years past, there was like the hope that you would win the tournament, but if you had an at-large bid seemingly clinch like the 2022 team, like I don't feel like there was quite as much pressure, although that team was certainly good enough to win it. 2021 felt like it was more intense. It's going to be fun, man. The basketball is always awesome. The competition is always great. We're going to keep talking about all of it. We do got to shout out to a couple of our other partners real quick. Got to pay the bills. All right. Shout out to Breckenridge Brewery. They're the official craft beer of DNVR. They've been with us since day one. Longtime partners. They've got an awesome opportunity coming up. If you are a hockey fan, enter the Breck Brew Ice Deck giveaway. Not only are you going to get a pair of VIP tickets on the glass for the March 29th game against the Blues, you're going to get complimentary food and drinks. I mean, you have a chance to really live the high life here, to, live your inner celebrity, sit on the glass, get the free drinks. Like, that's sick. I've seen these seats. They're right by the goal. Like, it's an awesome view. There's a ton of action there in the corner. You don't want to miss out on this. Also, check out Breck Brew's new West Coast style IPA, Ridge Runner. The double dry hopped brew is inspired by the untamed beauty of Colorado's trails, creates notes of bright citrus and pine. Check out the Breck Beer Locator at breckbrew.com to find a brew near you. And check out the breckbrew.com/ice deck to enter the ice deck giveaway for that opportunity to get the VIP tickets against against the Blues, I should say, on March 29th. I also want to shout out Lucy Nicotine. Lucy Nicotine, one of our newer partners, one of the partners I'm pretty excited about. 100% pure nicotine, always tobacco free. Lucy breakers are unique. They're these pouches that they offer a little bit of extra surprise. Each pouch holds a capsule that can be broken open to release extra flavor and hydration. If you've ever done the pouches before, sometimes they can feel a little bit like, I don't know, like if you ever like ripped a straw off and you get like the gnarly paper in your mouth and it's hard to get off, something like that. Like, they can get kind of gross texture wise. Not with Lucy though. I really love the mango flavor. That's my personal favorite. And I love that they have a 4 milligram option. So many times, it's not enough, or it's way too overwhelming. Some people are doing like 8 milligrams. That's too intense for me. I do love a 4 milligram mango though. Go to lucy.co/DNVR. Use the promo code DNVR, get 20% off your first order. Lucy does have a 30-day refund policy if you change your mind. Again, that's lucy.co. Use the code DNVR to get 20% off. Here comes the fine print, folks. Lucy products are only for adults of legal age. Every order is age verified. Warning, this product contains nicotine. Nicotine is an addictive chemical. All right, let's get into the bubble watch. We'll talk more about the Mountain West tournament. Talk about some of the matchups today. Got the first 3 games. None of them are looking like they should be all-time thrillers just based on the spreads, but we'll talk about them either way. CSU, last I checked, Lenardi had them as the 5th team out of his brackets. Right there in the mix. And some of the teams that CSU should be rooting against, I think the first one is kind of obvious, but Boise State. I thought CSU should have leaped Boise State in the bubble just with the 2 head-to-head wins. I understand the non-conference resumes don't even compare. I mean, the Broncos beat St. Mary's. I think they beat Clemson as well. They've got a couple of statement wins, in their non-conference resume. A lot more meat on that resume than CSU as a whole this season, but I do feel like the head-to-head should count for something. Boise State plays San Diego State in that 4-5 matchup. Had CSU lost in Boise, that's where the Rams would have been as well. I went back and forth on it because I don't feel like San Diego State is quite as intimidating as some of these other top teams in the league. I also feel like just on brand alone, I kind of have to give them the benefit of the doubt. I talked about the last couple of years, like this year wasn't the best example with Boise, but the year before when they won the league and they were just not even that good. And like they still won the league, or like the Chiefs, some of these times they've won the division, or like they went on and won the Super Bowl 2 years ago. It's like, if you're going to let them win the Super Bowl this year, they're going to win it every year. And San Diego State just always seems to turn it on, even when they haven't been that great. They're really dangerous in the tournament. Their fans travel well. I expect pretty good attendance, from San Diego State, from UNM. Wyoming fans might be there for day one because the women are in the championship game, but I like where CSU ended up, even though they're going to have to play, if they win, in the late semifinal, and if they win that, are in the championship game in the afternoon. I don't think San Diego State would have been super scary, but I just like avoiding that 4 or 5 game and not having to deal with it in your first matchup. If you win, you're likely going on to New Mexico, but I feel like if it comes down to CSU and Boise, like in the championship game, for instance, it would probably be winner makes it and the loser is on the outside looking in. Not a guarantee, but that's just kind of how I view it based on the bubble right now. Actually, CSU the 4th team out of the field, according to Lenardi. Shout out to the Toyota chat. Appreciate you guys. Some other teams you should be rooting against from some bigger programs. North Carolina, Boise, kind of those first 2 teams out in most brackets. They play Notre Dame today, who won a thriller yesterday. Some controversy, I know, some of those calls, but I should be rooting for Notre Dame. North Carolina, I think at this point, has proven multiple times over that they don't deserve a bid. But again, there's a human element to this. They are one of the biggest basketball brands in the country. I just have a hard time seeing the committee not give them the benefit of the doubt over a Mountain West program if it came down to those 2 teams. I don't think that's necessarily logical. I don't even think the ACC is that much better of a hoops league the last couple of years. Historically, yes, but the last couple of years, no. I just have a hard time seeing the committee leave a team like North Carolina out, like if they were to win a couple of games here in the ACC tournament. So I think them losing day one would be big for CSU, especially if the Rams were also able to go on a run themselves. I should be rooting against UC Irvine. They're the 2 seed in their conference tournament. They don't know their opponent yet, but UC San Diego's had a great year. Should be kind of rooting for them. Should be rooting for as much chalk as possible. Basically, you want as few bid stealers as possible because you want any of those open bids, at the bottom for CSU to have an opportunity to take it. That didn't make sense. You know what I'm saying? You should be rooting against Texas. They play Vanderbilt today. Vandy seems to be pretty safely in the field. Texas, though, kind of on the border there. I'd be voting against both Texas and Oklahoma, who plays Georgia. Georgia, a while ago, was probably more of a question mark. I think at this point they played their way into the field, so you might as well vote for them. Vote for Iowa against Ohio State. Vote for Kansas State against Baylor. And vote for Marquette against Xavier. We've got a lot of comments here in the Toyota chat. Taylor says, go Iowa State, South Carolina, Notre Dame, Vandy, Iowa State, Seton Hall, Georgia, and Syracuse. I'm with you. I think those are teams you should be pulling for to potentially help CSU in this equation. Rams have done everything they've been able to the last couple of months. They've got a lot to overcome with those shortcomings in November and December. So we shall see. I like the spot we're in right now. I feel like CSU is as dangerous as anybody going into the matchup. But at the same time, like, it's just hard to win 3 games in 3 days. Yes, this team is as hot as anybody. Yes, they have all the momentum. They've won 7 straight, longest win streak in the league. They're winning pretty decisively. Not only did they go into Boise and beat them by double digits, but they've won their last 7 games by a margin of 18 points on average. They've been a really tough team. I think the biggest selling point for CSU in this is that they have closed the gap defensively between them and programs like San Diego State and New Mexico. Jeff Grammer did a great job of pointing this out on Twitter the other day, but basically San Diego State is the defensive blueprint that everybody tries to emulate in the league. And when you look at the teams that have won the league, the teams that have had success in the conference tournament over the last decade or so, defensive efficiency almost always correlates. And the Rams have been a top 3 offensive and defensive efficient team in conference play. What I like about this team is not only do they have that standard Nico Medved offense, which getting buckets has never been much of a consistent issue for this program. Yes, at times the shots just don't fall. But in terms of creating good offense, creating looks that you can live with, That's never been an issue for this team. That's always been one of the greatest strengths. They've always shared the ball well. They've always shot the 3-point ball that pretty well, although their numbers can be a little bit misleading at times. I think CSU's been a lot more consistent in league play this year. But you look at like the non-conference slate or even the last couple of years, the numbers tend to even out, but they would be just pretty streaky. Like it'd be really erratic. They'd hit 6, 7 in a row, then they'd miss 9 in a row, then they'd hit 3 in a row, and the numbers would look pretty good by the end. But it would be kind of all over the place this year. I do feel like they've been a little bit more stable for the most part, which bodes well, especially in a neutral site. I like that they have a roster with a lot of experience. No, this isn't a team that has played like multiple years together or anything like that, but they've got a lot of veterans that have played a lot of high level basketball that have been in these types of situations before. You look at the guys from the CSU team last year. I mean, if they don't win a couple of games in the conference tournament, they're on the outside looking in. I think back to that win over Nevada, top 25 team in the league last year. It was huge. And you might have to beat Nevada again to cash your ticket to the tournament. I don't want to just write them in. Like, is there a world in which Fresno State is able to upset them? Yes, but they're 12.5-point dogs this afternoon. Nevada swept the season series. And Fresno, after looking a little bit friskier there for a while, they feel like a team that knows the coach is probably not going to be back. Feels like a team that is just kind of in purgatory. So like I have a hard time seeing them punch up and pull this upset, although the path to that would just be Nevada being checked out. From a talent standpoint, these two teams don't even compare. If Nevada even plays to 50, 60% of their capability, they should win this one pretty easily and set up, that game 3 between CSU and Nevada. The other games today, Wyoming versus San Jose State. San Jose State 1.5-point favorites. They swept the season series versus the Cowboys. And UNLV also 12.5-point favorites over Air Force, although they are missing a couple of guys. So maybe Air Force could hang around, be a little bit frisky in that matchup. Assuming that Nevada does in fact win today, that they set up that rematch between CSU and the Wolfpack. Couple of things that stood out to me in those first matchups is you got to be able to slow down Davidson. Like I think one of the big things that allowed CSU to have success in this most recent win over Boise State is they largely were able to take Tyson Degenhart out of the game. He had 15 points or whatever, but a lot of it came at the free throw line. I don't think he only had 6, 7 field goal attempts from the floor. Not allowing him to constantly kill you on the post is huge. And Davidson, he's a guy that can kind of get whatever looks he wants in the paint. You've got to make somebody else step up and beat you. CSU did a really good job of limiting the damage of Xavier Dussel and Kobe Sanders. In that last matchup, they combined for 12 points, but just 4 and 9 from the floor, like didn't give him a ton of easy looks. Rollison had a big game. He was 8 of 16 from the floor, 21 points for Nevada. But you look at what CSU was able to do, and it was just really steady. Exactly what you would expect from the Rams. I mean, 55% from the floor, 52% from 3-point, 11 of 21 from 3-point versus 4 of 12 from Nevada. The perimeter has been an advantage for CSU in a lot of these games. You hope that it will continue to be so in the conference tournament, because not only has CSU done a good job of creating good looks from deep, knocking those looks down, they've defended the 3 really well, and it's been a big factor in a lot of these wins. Like you look at some of those games, they struggled in the league slate. They did allow the opponent to get hot. I think if they continue this trend with what we've seen now for a pretty extended period, though, they should be in a pretty good spot there. One thing that was a major issue and a big reason why Nevada was able to, at one point, go up 8 in the first half in that game in Fort Collins, were turnovers were definitely a problem early on. CSU had 9 in the first half, 7 in the second half, 16 for the game. Far too many. I mean, you're just gifting them easy opportunities the other way. It led to 20 points off of turnovers for Nevada. I mean, you take that out of the equation and CSU wins that game pretty comfortably by double digits. I did love the fight, though, that the Rams showed in both of those games. Obviously, going into Reno and winning in December was a huge moment. Nico Medved has looked back on it multiple times over the last couple of months. It just kind of felt like that was the game that gave CSU some hope. You know, you had just such a brutal month where you blow the game to VCU and you're up in the second half. You blow the game against Washington. You get your ass absolutely handed to you in Boulder in a game that you like barely showed up. You know, you lose the heartbreaker to UC Riverside, but even like DU and some of those other games, they were just such a struggle. And it felt like going into Reno and winning that game, although they obviously lost to New Mexico afterwards, but it just felt like it was the glimmer of hope. It was that moment of gratification that this team needed to not throw in the towel and to just stay bought in. And I've used this metaphor a lot over the years, but I think it's especially true when you have young players that are a major factor. You need them occasionally to just get a win because they need to see it. Like, you need those tangible moments to be able to keep them locked in and doing the right things on a daily basis, because it's hard to do for months and months on end, especially when you're never getting the results. Like, if you go to the gym every single day for years and you don't make a single ounce of progress, it's going to be hard to stick with it. Like, you need those moments of, oh man, I got a new max today. I was able to go up 2.5 pounds, 5 pounds after, you know, being stagnant, plateauing there for months. You need those moments of success. Like, it's human to just be like, all right, the process is right here. The results have not always come the way that I've wanted, but clearly the process is right. And if I refine some things and I stick to this process, I'm going to stack more wins along the way. And I do feel like that win over Nevada was just massive for CSU's confidence as a team. And obviously sweeping them was huge. They swept the state of Nevada for the first time, beating both UNLV and Nevada in both of their matchups. Those are programs that historically CSU has really struggled with. And I love the fight that the Rams showed in both of those matchups. Like, by the time they played Nevada in mid-February, CSU's more or less rolling at that point. You know, they've got some momentum. You're feeling good about the possibility of them making some noise down the back stretch. But then in the first half, you go down 8 and you're sitting there like, oh man, is this going to be another one of those nights? Like, is this going to be a heartbreaker where we thought this team had a chance to be different and we're just going to get put in our place here? And really, it was the opposite. Like, the Rams just showed such resolve in that game in Fort Collins. They go down 8, but they close the first half on a 13-5 run, end up making a 1-score game at halftime. And you felt great at that point. Like, you feel like, we've got all the momentum. We're gonna break this thing open in the second half, and that's exactly what they did. They went on a 23-7 run over the first 10 minutes of the second half after being down 8 with like 5-6 minutes left in the first. By the halfway mark of the second half, you're up as much as 15. You credit Nevada. They didn't lay down either. At one point, it looked like it might be, you know, a 20-point blowout. It looked like it could be basically like what CSU did to Air Force, where you have way too many turnovers in the first half. Sluggish. The offensive execution's not tremendous. But after hanging around, you know, you just break it open and beat them down the stretch. To Nevada's credit, CSU went up 19 with 8 minutes left. Nevada responded with an 8-0 run of their own. But they weren't really ever able to make it any more dangerous than that. Like, CSU, they attacked the hoop. I think back, Ethan Morton hit his first 3 of the season, which everybody was stoked about. But they made their free throws late. That continues to be one of the biggest strengths for this team. You know, they went 21-22 at the free throw line in that win over Boise State the other night. 20-27 in game 1 again, or game 2 against Nevada, which was not quite as solid as some of the others, but just getting to the line has been a strength for this team. And really, since then, they've knocked him down. I think you're definitely going to need more from some of the bench guys than you got in that last matchup. Sean Williams, only 3 points, 1 of 4 from the floor. Bowen Bourne, 5 points, 1 of 3 from the floor. Japa played 8 minutes that night. Morton had 5 points. You're going to need some of those guys to step up, but they have pretty consistently now over the last 6-8 weeks. It feels like at least one of Kashawn or Bowen, you know, most nights is going to give you a couple of points. Japa and Jorgensen have had really nice moments off the bench on both ends of the floor, and I love that they have 4 bigs that they feel comfortable playing. Like, obviously, you're hoping that Croc and Bemba are going to play the lion's share of these minutes. If it's a scenario where Jorgensen and Japa are having to play, you know, 15 plus minutes, you're probably in foul trouble or injury riddled, which could be could be a big problem for CSU. They are by far their best when Bemba is at the 5, Croc is at the 4. It gives them a level of toughness, and then you can mix Clifford and Morton and some of the length you can throw at teams defensively. Like, it's just been such a great strength for this team. But you like that you can count on Jorgensen, and you like that you can count on Joppa to give you 10 minutes a night. And, maybe Jorgensen hits a 3 at the top of the key. Maybe Joppa is able to get a couple of offensive boards. It feels like they both bring something a little bit different to the table than the guys you have in the starting lineup. But I like that they have 4 bigs that you can trust, especially in a conference tournament. You're going to need guys. You're going to need fresh legs at some point. I love that the trio of Jalen Lake, Neat Clifford, and Kyan Evans continue to consistently produce. If 2 out of 3 do what they're supposed to most nights, CSU is going to have a really good opportunity to beat most teams that they play, because those guys are both tremendous scorers. They can beat you anywhere on the floor. They can stretch the floor, but they can get to the hoop. On top of that, they're unselfish, so they're willing to make the open pass. They're willing to get other guys in the mix, and I think that's probably the biggest strength for this CSU team going into this event, is just that everybody has a really well-defined role. Everybody understands exactly what they need to accomplish, and they just really don't stray from it that frequently. If you were looking for ways this could go wrong, when the turnovers at times have been an issue for CSU, when they have less than 11, I think they're 12-1. They're basically a 500 team with north of that, though, so that could be a factor. Could be the games where CSU has struggled this year. Neat Clifford has maybe tried to do a little bit too much and has pressed some things when he hasn't been scoring. We haven't seen a lot of instances of that of late, but I'm just trying to talk through the scenarios with which, it could be an issue. Obviously, assuming you're playing Nevada, like, they do have talent. There's a reason that they were picked top 5 in the preseason, and they've been really disappointing. Like Nick Davidson, Kobe Sanders, Rollison, those are solid players, and they could just get hot for one day and spoil it. That would kind of feel like classic CSU. The year everybody has all this confidence. Like, I think Ram fans probably universally feel better going into this tournament than they have in a long time. And I think it's borderline cockiness. Like, we feel good about this team because they're playing damn good basketball. And that would just be like peak CSU to not even make the semifinals, pull a Ryan Williams and, come up short in the quarterfinal. Knock on wood, do whatever, voodoo you got to do. We're not hoping for that, obviously, but it just would be peak Ram life. But this team's different, man. And I'm not going to go in with that wet blanket mentality, with that woe is me, we never win these moments. Well, you never do until you do it. It's hard to win this event. It's a really tough format. There's a reason that, like, only the best programs consistently have success, but it just feels like this is the moment. This is the moment for CSU to strike while the iron is hot, while they have momentum, while the bracket has played out in their favor, and it feels like CSU is peaking at the right times, where maybe some of these other teams in the top 5 have peaked too early and are kind of running on fumes at the moment. It just feels like CSU is in a really good spot. And I think that's why the betting odds are as close as they are. I think I'm a little surprised New Mexico is not more drastically favored, just given the fact that they did sweep CSU. They've been really good. 17 league wins. They've been about as consistent as it gets over the last 6 weeks themselves. But that's a lot of respect for the Rams. And I think that's pretty cool. If you got any questions, comments, throw them our way in the Toyota chat. I'll get to as many as I can before we get out of here. Take a quick breather, throw out some fun Vegas stuff, give a couple of thoughts on the women's program. We'll call it a day. All right. Mason wants to know in the Toyota chat, do you think that us leaving the conference in part is the reason for snubbing Cayenne? No, it's voted on by the coaches and media, so I don't think there's Mountain West politics at play when it comes to that. I think that could be a factor with why Neat Clifford only won one Mountain West Player of the Week. There were a lot of weeks there where there were some guys that were picked. Donovan Dent's one thing, but there were a couple other guys that got picked on programs that are going to be sticking around, like a UNLV, that had me scratching my head and at least giving maybe a little bit of validity to the conspiracy theories. But honestly, I think what it comes down to is I think a lot of people just kind of stat watch. They don't necessarily watch the games. And I also think that there is an emphasis to have league-wide representation, kind of like how like the MLB All-Star game, every team gets an All-Star, even though there have definitely been years the Rockies didn't deserve an All-Star, but everybody gets to participate. Like I think they want some of that, not quite to that level, but they want as much conference-wide representation as possible. But I do think that there were some pretty questionable choices, I guess is how I would phrase it. Mile High guy, my guy Ken wants to know, if we don't make the big dance, are we a number 1 seed in the NIT and hosting a first round game? I don't want this to happen. Well, yeah, I mean, obviously we would hope to be in the NCAA tournament. The NIT would be a consolation prize, but it basically feels like your favorite restaurant being closed, so you stop for fast food instead. At least we're eating out technically, but and instead of that fancy Italian restaurant, we're getting a McDouble and a hot and spicy. I do think CSU would be. I do think they would host in the NIT. I think they would take that bid. I think it would be beneficial, assuming you're able to hang on to these guys. I guess there could be some coaching carousel stuff that factors into that potentially, but I do assume that they would want to play it, because I think when you look back at that 2021 NIT experience, it greatly benefited, David Roddy and Isaiah Stevens. And I think you just want to get as much postseason play as you can for, Cayenne and Bemba and Croc and some of these younger guys that you're hoping are going to be the core and the foundation of your roster moving forward these next couple of years. There's no guarantees in the modern era, and it makes it harder to do this type of stuff. Like the truth is, schools lose money on the NITs. Like that's part of why many programs have opted out in recent years. Like the fans don't care. It feels very hollow. It's like, yeah, I guess it matters, but not really. The thing is, though, is there's a value from a program growth standpoint, because you get to keep playing, you get to keep practicing, you get to get your guys experience in single elimination formats. Like the more opportunities you have to deal with the uniqueness of the single elimination format, I just think it's a strength. And after CSU made that run in 2021 in the NIT, we obviously saw them make the NCAA tournament in 2022, but we also saw them win in MTE, in the Paradise Jam or whatever it was when they beat Creighton and all those teams. So I think there is a lot of value for 4-year basketball program that comes out of an NIT bid, despite the fact that it would feel a lot like getting McDonald's when you were hoping for, your favorite Italian restaurant or whatever. I'll take it, but it's not what I'm hoping for, is how I would phrase it. If you're watching at home on TV, if you're watching via OTT, we'll be ending here at the hour mark, but you can keep following the show at the website. Just go to thednvr.com. We're not going to go much longer than the hour, but we might go a couple minutes over here. Before we get out of here, and again, if you want to keep the questions, comments rolling, I'll address as many as you guys send my way. I'm not going to do the Vegas stuff. It was silly anyways. I will just give a couple of more thoughts on the women's basketball program before we get out of here. And that's just that 9 years without an NCAA tournament bid in a league that is not very good is pretty underwhelming. And I think that with the previous administration under Joe Parker, that was fine. Was perfectly content having a non-revenue generating program, so long as they weren't problematic, they weren't a train wreck. And again, that's never been the case under Williams. They've won 20 plus games 9 different times. They're almost always in the top half of the league. They're not a disaster, but there's also a clear level between them and the championship contenders. And that's been the case now for 5+ years, despite the fact that CSU has had players like McKenna Hofschild and the Ronsick sisters this year. There were some pretty big promises made to the boosters when the cash was being collected to be able to land a player like Emma Ronsick. And for this team to not only not finish top 2 again, to finish 3rd, below UNLV and Wyoming, where they have consistently been now for 5+ years, and then not even make the semifinals in the conference tournament is just unacceptable. It's underwhelming. It's unacceptable though. And admittedly, I didn't expect CSU to get to the title game. I assumed they would lose in the semis to Wyoming like they almost always do. But now seeing that UNLV got knocked off, and it should have been CSU versus Wyoming part 3 for an opportunity to play for likely the conference championship. Like I think Wyoming or CSU should beat San Diego State in the title game. The Rams swept them in the regular season. It just makes it feel that much worse. Like it's that little extra layer of salt in the wounds, knowing that you wouldn't have even had to play UNLV, who you don't match up well with. If you just beat Fresno State, a team that you should beat 100 times out of 100 in this setting, you'd have a really good opportunity to play your way into the NCAA tournament. And this is just kind of classic CSU under Williams. They don't win the big games. They're very consistently that third best team under the other two contenders. The non-conference slate is usually, stacking wins against unexciting programs. Like we never play CU despite the fact that they're a great team. Like I don't know. I don't know what they want the program to be. I think the administration has been pretty open about championship level aspirations. And I guess I would ask myself, after 9 years of the same thing, 7 straight years without even finishing top 2, is it really realistic to expect anything more than what we've seen? If you couldn't get over the top with Hofschild or Emma Ronzik, how are you going to get over the top? And I know there's some up and coming freshmen. I get it. Like there's some talent, but they've always had talent in recent years, and it hasn't mattered at all. So I have a hard time seeing this be acceptable, like going into the Pac-12 era. I think it would probably surprise me if there were any moves made this off season, just being completely transparent. I think with some potential payments you're going to have to make in some other sports possibly down the line. You probably aren't willing to jump it. If you let him stay one more year, he could finish out the Mountain West, then you'd just be cutting 1 year of his deal, which wouldn't be that big of a deal. But it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see kind of what Weber and Parsons decide and what they want this program to be. And I think there's kind of a reflection moment here that the Rams are going to have to go through as a program. Like, are we content just being there for the ride, being a team that, wins 20 games, sure, but never really accomplishes anything of substance? Or do we want to be a championship contending team like this program was in the 90s in the WAC? Like the greatness we saw with Becky Hammond, and even some of the success early in the Williams tenure, although I've pointed out the league was very much down when the Rams went on that run. And even when they won 4 straight regular season conference titles, they still only had 1 NCAA tournament appearance to show for it. I get it's hard in a 1-bid league. I do. But the expectation is the expectation. And CSU should be running things in women's sports. Just when you look at the level of athletic investment that CSU puts in these programs compared to a lot of their competition, volleyball, soccer, women's hoops, track, like we should be dominating. And we've done that in track and volleyball pretty consistently. Soccer's on the rise. Feels like hoops is kind of the 4th team in that mix in terms of consistently reaching the ceiling that they should be able to. And I just think people should expect more from that program, especially considering the league just isn't that good. It's not like they're coming up short against, all world programs. So anyways, that's my 2 cents on it all. I don't love doing those type of rants. It's why I don't talk about the women's hoops program all that much. One, it's not my main focus. I don't cover it professionally, but I don't love like doing drive-by commentary where the only thing I say is negative. But I think it's hard to embrace the program right now because I think the fans kind of know what it is. And that's not a good spot to be as a program, is apathetic. So that's all I've got for you guys today. Shout out to everybody for rocking with us. Should be a really fun out in Vegas for the Mountain West tournament. I'll have plenty of premium written content. Again, I ask you to take advantage of the $36 Die Hard sale this week. Best deal we'll have all year. So if you want to be a Die Hard, now is the opportunity. Much love, y'all. We are always proud to be. Peace.
We all silly like the mayor.